Welcome back to Lessons from the Front, and this is the Cromwell Mk IV F. Well, technically speaking, this vehicle can be described in several different ways. The designation A27M refers to the tank's official development type, while Cromwell Mk VIII was used as an overarching designation for the wider family of Cromwell tanks. But this particular vehicle's exact production variant is the Mk IV F, the version standing here today at the Overloon War Museum in the Netherlands. And this is far more than just a museum exhibit. This Cromwell tank is a genuine veteran of the Battle of Overloon, the heaviest tank battle ever fought on Dutch soil. My son Matthew and I had the privilege of visiting the museum together, and while walking through the collection we came across this remarkable survivor. As a bolt-action player, the Cromwell is also a vehicle that holds a special interest for me personally. In fact, I currently have 3 Cromwell models for use in bolt action, so a little later in this video we'll be taking a closer look at the tank itself and how it performs in Warlord Games' bolt action rules, and we'll be having Richard, an expert wargamer, give us some input. Built in England by Leyland Motors at their Farrington factory, the Cromwell represented a new generation of fast British armoured warfare. At its heart was a legendary Rolls-Royce Meteor engine, a 600 horsepower adaptation of the Merlin aircraft engine that powered the famous Supermarine Spitfire. Unlike the American Sherman, which also used an aircraft-derived engine and required a tall hull design to accommodate it, the Cromwell's Meteor engine was mounted in a much more compact layout. British engineers designed the tank around the engine from the beginning, allowing the Cromwell to maintain a lower silhouette and a sleeker profile on the battlefield.
So one of the interesting things about British tanks, and the Cromwell specifically, is that the driver's hatch for the driver hatch of the vehicle opens up sideways. So it opens up top.
Yes, that's rather interesting, and this design choice was largely driven by internal layout and protection requirements. The Cromwell's low-profile hull left limited space in the front glacis, and a traditional upward opening hatch would have required cutting into critical armor structure or reducing protection. A side opening hatch allowed the designers to maintain structural integrity while still giving the driver practical means of escape under combat conditions, and is probably what saved the crew's life at Overloon. It's a small but revealing detail showing how every element of the tank was a compromise between protection, space, and battlefield practicality. In terms of size, the Cromwell struck a careful balance between mobility, protection, and firepower. The tank measured just over 21 feet in length, around 9 feet 6 inches wide, and stood approximately 8 feet tall, noticeably lower though than many Allied tanks of the period. Depending on the exact variant, the Cromwell weighed around 27 to 28 tons and had a crew of 5. Armament on the Mk IV typically consisted of the British 75mm main gun, supported by 2 7.9mm Beezer machine guns. Armor thickness ranged from around 8mm on weaker areas up to 76mm at the front of the hull and turret. One of the key reasons the Cromwell could achieve high levels of speed was its suspension system. It used a Christie type suspension layout, a design that relied on large road wheels and long travel coil springs rather than small, closely packed bogies. This gave the tank a relatively smooth ride at speed, especially across rough ground, and it helped it maintain momentum during fast-moving armored advances. You can see it in the spacing and size of the road wheels. Fewer, larger components designed to absorb impact and keep the vehicle stable at speed. Paired with its wide tracks, the Cromwell distributed its weight effectively enough to operate across fields, roads, and broken terrain in northwest Europe. It's this combination, engine power, suspension design, and relatively low weight, that made the Cromwell feel less like a heavy tank, more like an armored vehicle built to move. Powered by that Rolls-Royce Meteor engine, the Cromwell could reach speeds of over 40 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest Allied tanks to see combat in northwest Europe. That mobility is even reflected in bolt action, where the Cromwell is classed as a fast tank. Under the Warlord Games' rules, that allows the vehicle to advance 12 inches in a standard move. That's 3 inches faster than most tracked vehicles in the game.
On October the 13th, 1944, during the final Allied assault on Overloon, this Cromwell was hit in the rear hull. The impact ignited the Rolls-Royce Meteor engine, and within moments the fire spread towards the stored ammunition. Thanks to the armoured bulkheads separating the engine compartment from the crew compartment, the crew were given a few brief moments to escape before the ammunition detonated and destroyed the tank. The burnt-out vehicle was later stripped for spare parts and left abandoned on the battlefield. But unlike so many wartime wrecks, this Cromwell survived. In 1946, the vehicle was recovered along with hundreds of other abandoned armoured vehicles when the battlefield at Overloon was preserved as a permanent memorial. Today it stands here at the Overloon War Museum as a scarred but powerful reminder of the battle that was fought here in 1944. And for those of us involved in bolt action, vehicles like the Cromwell continue to live out not only in museums but also on the tabletop. In fact, if you'd like to see my own Cromwells in action, you can check out one of my earlier battle reports, Clashed in the Odin Valley, and I'll leave the link below, where they went head-to-head with the German Panzer IVs in a tense tank engagement. But now, rather than just hearing my thoughts, let's hand over to Richard, who's going to share his perspective on the Cromwell and tanks more broadly within Bolt Action version 3.
Oh, hi Eugene and viewers. Great to be back on Lessons from the Front. Eugene has asked me to give my perspective of the British Cromwell in Bolt Action, so let me have a go. Now, first up, unfortunately, I have a range of relatively equivalent tanks, and unfortunately you'll see there is no Cromwell there. I unfortunately do not own one, but I'm about to change that soon. So let's start. Why the Cromwell? What's it got? For regular, you get it at about 220 points. It's Armour 9. It's got a 75mm medium anti-tank gun on board, but what's special about it in the British variant is that it has improved HE, which gives him the 2-inch template, which makes it quite effective against infantry. But the big so what with the Cromwell now with the latest version is it is fast. And I'll come back to that, but that to me is what gives the Cromwell the edge. First of all, let's look at some of its peers. We have the, I'll start on my right with the Germans. I'm going to start in the middle actually. We first of all have the Panzer III AFS L or M, which has a medium anti-tank gun on it, also Armour 9, comes in at 195 points. Why is it less? Doesn't have improved HE, not fast. Very similar to it is the Soviet T-34, the T-34-76, exactly same points, same variant. It's a normal Armour 9 medium anti-tank gun. Then you move on to the slightly better variants of the German Armour, also Armour 9, but the Panzer IV with the AFS LM late variants. They, though, have the heavy anti-tank gun, which gives it a much better killing power against tanks, but doesn't have the improved HE, and they're not fast. So I still put them in the comparable bracket. The reason I'm showing two is you can buy skirts for the Panzer IV. You can actually do it for the Panzer III as well. On the Allied side, the other two tanks that come to fore are the Sherman. I've got the British variant here, and I've got the American variant next to it. If you upgrade it, get rid of easily catches fire, etc., you get back to a similar points cost for a medium anti-tank gun Armour 9 tank, but in all cases, what you don't have is fast. So overall, if I compare it to its peers, I'd probably prefer the Cromwell, just for what it gives us. Now let's move on to why would I play these tanks, or why would I play the Cromwell in the game of Bolt Action? At the moment, you're not seeing Armour 9 and up tanks, except now and then, especially in the competitive space. The meta seems to be moving to lots of small tanks, lots of Armour 7 and 8, lots of Dakar firepower, nipping around, swarming you, and effectively dominating the table. And what I'm starting to see is a sort of paper, scissors approach. Everyone's sort of following the same piece. And with that, you're starting to get it's normalizing down to who plays better with that sort of meta that's evolving. I think there's time for a change. The bit I love about Bolt Action is because of the variants in the army books and because of the variants in the army build, that single meta no longer exists. And what happens is you tend to get fashionable play rather than this is now the new super uber killer list. Because of that, as everybody tends into a meta, the guy who's going to win is probably the guy who breaks that and comes up with something different. And maybe it's time for the medium tank to emerge. And who's the better contender for this than the Cromwell? At 220 points with fast and good anti-infantry, suddenly you've got a pretty versatile unit that can cover most bases. So that's sort of where my thinking is going. Let's talk about the Cromwell itself. Why would I use it? How would I use it, etc.? As I've said, the key component for the Cromwell versus its peers is the fact that it's fast. With this, it means you can get in close and cause damage quicker than the enemy realizes. For example, hide behind a forest. Enemy moves up, they think, you're only going to move 9 inches, that's fine. Next minute, 12 inches, you're through the forest, potentially within point blank range. Now firing a medium anti-tank gun at point blank means you're going to hit on a 3+. Infantry, get in close. You've now got a 2-inch template that's probably got a high probability of hitting. And if that infantry is not in cover, you're going to get a good bunch of them, including veterans with a +2 penetration. Also with fast, you can run away. You can capture contest objectives or get victory points in breakthrough missions. You've suddenly got a tank that can move around the battlefield and give a strong punch. Now, I might hear you say, but can't the Chaffee do that? And you can buy the Chaffee at probably 170 points, 180 points with Recce? Yes, you could. Why would I prefer the Cromwell? Well, the Chaffee, first of all, is only Armour 8. So if it does get hit, it's got a higher chance of being taken out. Secondly, it's got vulnerable, which means if it's hit on the sides, you're in real trouble. The Cromwell doesn't suffer from any of those facts. On the other hand, the Cromwell doesn't have Recce, but to be honest with you, when I've paid 220 points, I don't want to be running away from stuff. I actually want to be going out and taking stuff out or taking ground. So I would prefer the Cromwell out of all of the medium tanks. I'm probably going to start playing a Cromwell. I do have a British para-army. I think the Cromwell is going to join my 2 anti-aircraft tanks to become the backbone of my paras in the future. Eugene, watch the space because I'm coming for you. Thanks, everyone. And all the very best in your bolt action playing.
That was really interesting. Thank you, Richard, for sharing your perspectives on the Cromwell and tanks in Bolt Action version 3. I look forward to having you back on Lessons from the Front in the near future. I'd also like to say thank you to my son, Matthew, for doing some of the research of the Cromwell behind the scenes. I trust that you enjoyed this episode of Lessons from the Front. Please do give it a thumbs up and do leave any comments for Richard in the comments below. So then until next time, happy gaming!